Playing with Power MTG. Powerful cards, powerful formats. Before we get into tonight's game, I wanted to talk about our sponsor, Enhanced Gaming. Enhanced products are focused on improving, complementing, and leveling up the gaming lifestyle. They make accessories for tabletop games like MTG, miniatures, D&D, and board games. They focus on quality and expression to elevate your gaming experience. I have been using their MTG Backpack playing card case for the last couple of months. I love its high quality construction. It is made of a durable material and not just cheap plastic. It has rugged, high quality zippers to ensure they won't snag or break during regular use. When using the backpack, I could tell it was made by someone who actually plays the game and uses the accessories. It has a fully customizable interior so you can adjust it to whatever configuration you need. You can hold a few decks, a lot of decks, deck boxes of different sizes, or even an entire cube. I love that the interior sleeve was big enough to hold my trade binder, even the big ones that I carry around. It has large accessory pockets on the front, so I can grab dice, coins, or extra tokens without having to open up the entire bag. The Card Defender screen ensures that my card boxes won't shift around during travel. The Defender screen also allows me to carry around loose cards without them getting all over the backpack. What really sold me on the product was the thought given to carrying around your playmat. Playmats are usually an afterthought when it comes to the accessories. This case gives you the room to carry around a loose playmat or even a playmat in a storage tube to ensure your playmat is fully protected and secured wherever you go. Check out our link in the description and pick up yours today. Visit Enhanced Gaming today and elevate your gaming experience. Now, let's start out by showcasing our fighters this evening. First, we have Daquan piloting Jetmir, Nexus of Rebels. This is an aggro stacked deck that uses its commander to pump up its creatures and win through combat. Daquan's opening hand contains a Scalding Tarn, Windswept Heath, Temple Garden, Wild Growth, Pithing Needle, Archon of Valor's Reach, and a Finehorn Elves. Next, we have Alan piloting Korvold, Fae-Cursed King. This deck, called Treasure Storm, seeks to resolve a Dockside Extortionist, draw cards with Korvold, and dig for the win. Alan's opening hand contains an Arid Mesa, Badlands, Blood Crypt, Viscera Seer, Soul Ring, Ad Nauseam, and an Eternal Witness. After that, we have Jay piloting Prosper, Tome-Bound. This is a Rakdos deck that seeks to gain card advantage through its commander and Storm Out and win. Jay's opening hand contains an Aetherflux Reservoir, Yawgmoth's Will, Sulphurous Springs, Command Tower, Dockside Extortionist, Ancient Tomb, and a Marsh Flats. Finally, we have Kevin piloting Kozilek, the Great Distortion. This deck seeks to ramp out its commander, then control the board while slamming the Eldrazi Titan into opponents' faces. Kevin's opening hand contains an Urza Saga, Mishra's Bauble, Walking Ballista, Inventor's Fair, Soul Ring, Aetherflux Reservoir, and a Mana Vault. Without further ado, let's commence this compelling conniving contest of contenders. Daquan sent in the most cereal box barcodes and gets to start us off. Daquan draws a card for turn and plays a Windswept Heath. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Savannah onto the battlefield. He casts a Finehorn Elves and passes the turn. Alan draws for turn and plays a Badlands. He casts a Soul Ring. He ends his turn. Jay draws and plays a Command Tower. He ships the turn to Kevin. Kevin draws and plays an Urza Saga, getting its first counter. He casts a Soul Ring. He casts a Mana Vault. He casts Aetherflux Reservoir. Everyone snaps to attention as Reservoir resolves. Kevin casts Mishra's Bauble. Aetherflux triggers and he gains 4 life. He casts Walking Ballista, where X equals 0. Aetherflux triggers and he gains another 5 life. Then Walking Ballista goes to the graveyard. With nothing else, Kevin gives the turn to Daquan. Daquan draws and plays a Forest. He casts a Pithing Needle. In response, Kevin cracks Mishra's Bauble to look at the top card of Daquan's library. Needle resolves and Daquan names Aetherflux Reservoir. He casts a Wild Growth, enchanting his forest. Daquan passes. During Alan's upkeep, Kevin draws a card through Mishra's Bauble. Alan draws and plays an Arid Mesa. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Taiga onto the battlefield. He casts Viscera Seer. He casts Orcish Lumberjack. He passes the turn. Jay draws and plays an Ancient Tomb. He taps it to help cast Dockside Extortionist. Dockside enters and Jay creates 7 treasures. He casts Tainted Pact. Jay exiles cards from the top of his library until he reveals an Underworld Breach into his hand. He casts Yawgmoth's Will. He recasts Tainted Pact from his graveyard. He exiles until he reveals an Imperial Seal into his hand. Then Tainted Pact is exiled through Yawgmoth's Will. He casts Imperial Seal. He fetches up a card onto the top of his library, loses 2 life, and then Imperial Seal is exiled. All through, he ends his turn. During his draw step, Kevin takes a damage through his Mana Vault. In his main phase, Urza Saga gets another counter. He plays an Inventor's Fair. He casts Mox Opal. Aetherflux triggers and he gains a life. He casts Mind Stone. Aetherflux triggers and he gains 2 life. Kevin ships the turn to Daquan. Daquan draws and plays a Verdant Catacombs. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Taiga onto the battlefield. He casts Rocco, Caparati Caterer, where X equals 2. He fetches up a Collector Oof onto the battlefield and passes the turn. Alan draws and plays a Blood Crypt into play untapped, paying 2 life. He activates Orcish Lumberjack, sacrificing Taiga, adding 3 red. He casts Ad Nauseam. It resolves, and Alan reveals a Crop Rotation, Spire Garden, Simian Spirit Guide, Mana Confluence, Polluted Delta, Phyrexian Tower, Gamble, Cabal Ritual, Grinding Station, Life and Death, Talisman of Impulse, Felwar Stone, Beseju Who Endures, Wooded Foothills, Talisman of Resilience, Dualcaster Mage, Burnt Offering, Vampiric Tutor, Imperial Recruiter, Verdant Catacombs, Dauthi Voidwalker, Corpse Dance, and a Culling the Weak, deciding to stop there. He casts Jeweled Lotus. He casts Crop Rotation, sacrificing Blood Crypt as an additional cost. He fetches up an Undergrowth Stadium onto the battlefield. He exiles Simian Spirit Guide from his hand to help cast Gamble. He fetches up a card into his hand and then randomly discards Cabal Ritual. He casts Culling the Weak, sacrificing Orcish Lumberjack as an additional cost, adding 4 black. He casts Burnt Offering, sacrificing Viscera Seer as an additional cost, adding 1 black. He casts Dauthi Voidwalker. He casts Vampiric Tutor. He fetches up a card onto the top of his library and loses 2 life. With nothing else, he passes, discarding to hand size. Jay draws and plays a Luxury Suite. He taps his Ancient Tomb to help cast his commander, Prosper, Tome-Bound. Jay moves to combat and attacks Daquan with Dockside Extortionist. Daquan declares no blocks and takes the hit. Jay moves to his end step, Prosper triggers, exiling Lightning Bolt. Jay gives the turn to Kevin. During Kevin's upkeep, he gains a life through his Inventor's Fair. During his draw step, he takes a damage from his Mana Ball. In his first main phase, Urza's Saga triggers. He floats mana and then sacrifices it, fetching up Grafdigger's Cage onto the battlefield. He plays an Urza's Power Plant. He cycles Blasted Landscape, drawing a card. Kevin passes the turn. Daquan draws and plays a Temple Garden, into play untapped, paying 2 life. He moves to combat and attacks Alan with Collector Oof and Rocco. With no way to stop the damage, Alan takes it all and dies. In his second main phase, he casts Archon of Valor's Reach. It resolves and Daquan chooses instant. He ends his turn. Jay draws and plays a Sulphurous Springs. He taps his Ancient Tomb and Sulphurous Springs to help cast Demonic Tutor. He fetches up a card into his hand. He casts Jessica's Will, targeting Daquan. He adds 2 red and then exiles a Braid, Deflecting Swat, and Mox Opal off of the top of his library. He casts Mox Opal from exile. Prosper triggers and he creates a treasure. Jay moves to his end step, Prosper triggers, and he exiles a Badlands. He passes the turn to Kevin. During Kevin's upkeep, he gains a life through his Inventor's Fair. During his draw step, he takes a damage through his Mana Vault. He does nothing else and ships the turn to Daquan. Daquan draws and plays a Scalding Tarn. He casts his commander, Jetmir, Nexus of Rebels. He moves to combat and attacks Jay with the Archon and Kevin with Rocco, Collector Oof, and Finehorn Elves. They both take it, and Daquan passes. Jay draws and plays a Badlands from exile. Prosper triggers, and he creates a treasure. He taps his Ancient Tomb to help cast Aetherflux Reservoir. He casts Lion's Eye Diamond. Aetherflux triggers, and he gains 2 life. Jay moves to his end step, Prosper triggers, and he exiles Burgi, God of Storytelling. He ships the turn. During Kevin's upkeep, he gains a life through his Inventor's Fair. During his draw step, he takes a damage through his Mana Vault. He plays an Eldrazi Temple and passes the turn. Daquan draws and decides to end the fun that Jay has been having. He casts Durannith Magistrate. He casts Deafening Silence. Daquan moves to combat and attacks Jay with Archon and Jetmir, and Kevin with Collector Oof, Finehorn Elves, and Rocco. They both declare no blocks and take the damage. Daquan gives the turn to Jay. Jay draws and plays a Gemstone Caverns. He moves to the end step, Prosper triggers, exiling an Arid Mesa. Jay passes. During Kevin's upkeep, he gains a life through his Inventor's Fair. During his draw step, he takes a damage through his Mana Vault. He takes them with their actions and ends his turn. Daquan draws and casts Sylvan Library. He moves to combat and attacks Jay with Jetmir and the Archon, and Kevin with Collector Oof, Finehorn Elves, Durannith Magistrate, and Rocco. Jay blocks with Prosper, while Kevin declares no blocks. Then they take the rest. Daquan passes the turn. Jay draws, and deciding to go out on his own terms, he casts Doomsday. It resolves, he loses his last life, and dies. The turn moves to Kevin. During Kevin's upkeep, he gains a life through Inventor's Fair. During his draw step, he takes a damage through his Mana Vault. He casts Foundry Inspector. Aetherflux triggers, and Kevin gains a life. He casts Urza's Bauble. Aetherflux triggers, and he gains 2 more life. Kevin passes. At the end of Kevin's turn, Daquan cracks a Scalding Tarn, pays a life, and fetches up a Sacred Foundry onto the battlefield tapped. The turn moves to Daquan. During his draw step, Daquan draws 2 extra through Sylvan Library, putting 2 back on top. He recasts his commander, Jetmir, Nexus of Rebels. He moves to combat, swings all of his creatures at Kevin, killing him, and Daquan wins the game. Since everyone really wanted to see Kozilek hit the table, the team decided to give it another round. In this game, Daquan is piloting Anamatu the Fate Shifter. This Esper deck seeks to control the board and accrue value using its commander. His opening hand contains a Misty Rainforest, Enlightened Tutor, Force of Negation, Mystical Tutor, Counterbalance, Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth, and a Whispering Madness. Alan brings back Korvold, Fae-Cursed King, and his opening hand contains an Undergrowth Stadium, Worldly Tutor, Diabolic Intent, Chrome Mox, Gamble, City of Brass, and his London Mulligan is Avilis, Broker of Blood. Jay brings back Prosper, Tome-Bound, and his opening hand contains an Arid Mesa, Valky, God of Lies, Jeweled Lotus, Tainted Pact, Culling the Weak, Ancient Tomb, and a Stitcher's Supplier. Kevin brings back Kozilek, the Great Distortion. In his opening hand contains an Ancient Tomb, Wasteland, Grim Monolith, Grafdigger's Cage, Chromatic Star, Metal Worker, and an Expedition map. And Daquan gets to start us off. Daquan draws for turn and plays a Misty Rainforest. He casts a Chrome Mox, imprinting Whispering Madness. He cracks the Misty Rainforest, pays a life, and fetches up a Tundra onto the battlefield. He casts Counterbalance. The table groans, and he passes the turn to Alan. Alan draws and plays an Undergrowth Stadium. He ships the turn to Jay. Jay draws and plays an Arid Mesa. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Badlands onto the battlefield. He casts Stitcher's Supplier. Counterbalance triggers, and Daquan reveals a Vault of Champions. Stitcher's Supplier resolves, and Jay mills 3 cards. He passes the turn. Kevin draws and plays an Ancient Tomb. He taps his Ancient Tomb to help cast Grim Monolith. He casts a Metal Worker. He passes. At the end of Kevin's turn, Alan casts Worldly Tutor. He fetches up a Dockside Extortionist onto the top of his library. Daquan draws and plays a Vault of Champions. He gives the turn to Alan. Alan draws and plays a City of Brass. He casts Chrome Mox. Counterbalance triggers, and Daquan reveals a Morphic Pool, countering Chrome Mox. Alan taps his City of Brass to help cast Dockside Extortionist. Counterbalance triggers, and in response, Daquan casts Mystical Tutor. He fetches up a Limdul's Vault onto the top of his library. The counterbalance trigger resolves. Daquan reveals Limdul's Vault, countering Dockside. Daquan has made a mortal enemy this day as Alan passes the turn. Jay draws and plays an Ancient Tomb. He casts a Jeweled Lotus. He casts Culling the Weak, sacrificing Stitcher's Supplier as an additional cost. Stitcher's Supplier triggers, and Jay mills 3 cards. He taps his Ancient Tomb to help cast Yawgmoth's Will. Counterbalance triggers, and in response, Daquan casts Enlightened Tutor. He fetches up a Rhystic Study onto the top of his library. In response to counterbalance, Jay casts Tainted Pact. It resolves, and he exiles cards until he reveals Underworld Breach, putting it into his hand. Then counterbalance resolves. Daquan reveals Rhystic Study, countering Yawgmoth's Will. Next, Jay casts his commander, Prosper, Tome-Bound. He moves to his end step, Prosper triggers, and he exiles a Felwar Stone. Jay ships the turn to Kevin. Kevin draws and plays a Wasteland. He activates Metal Worker, revealing Ashnod's Altar, Chromatic Star, Grafdigger's Cage, Chromatic Sphere, and an Expedition map, adding 10 colorless mana. He taps his Ancient Tomb to help cast Grafdigger's Cage. He casts Chromatic Star. He casts Chromatic Sphere. He casts his commander, Kozilek, the Great Distortion. Kozilek triggers, and Kevin draws 5 cards. All through, he passes the turn. Daquan draws and plays an Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth. He casts Rhystic Study. Daquan gives the turn to Alan. Alan draws and plays an Exotic Orchard. He casts Gamble, paying the Rhystic tax. Alan fetches up a card into his hand and then randomly discards a Reanimate, which is what he tutored for. With nothing going right for Alan this game, he passes to Jay. Jay draws and casts Mox Opal. Counterbalance and Rhystic both trigger. Daquan draws through Rhystic and then reveals City of Brass through Counterbalance, countering Mox Opal. Jay taps his Ancient Tomb to help cast Felwar Stone from exile. Prosper, Counterbalance, and Rhystic all trigger. Daquan draws through Rhystic and then reveals a Pact of Negation through Counterbalance. Jay then creates a treasure through Prosper. He casts Valki, God of Lies. Counterbalance and Rhystic trigger. Daquan draws through Rhystic and then reveals a Swamp through Counterbalance. Valki resolves, hands are revealed, but there are no creatures to be found. Jay casts Dragon's Rage Channeler. Daquan draws through Rhystic and then declines to reveal off of Counterbalance. Jay moves to his end step, Prosper triggers, and he exiles a Pyroblast. He ends his turn. Kevin draws and activates Metal Worker, revealing 5 artifacts, adding 10 colorless mana. He casts Semblance Anvil, Counterbalance, and Rhystic trigger. Daquan draws through Rhystic and reveals a Notion Thief through Counterbalance. In response, Daquan casts Force of Negation, exiling a blue card, targeting Semblance Anvil. In response, Kevin activates Kozilek, discarding Ashnod's Altar, countering Force of Negation. Semblance Anvil then resolves, and then Kevin imprints Expedition map. He sacrifices Chromatic Sphere and draws a card. He taps his Ancient Tomb to help cast Ugin, the Spirit Dragon, paying the Rhystic tax. He activates Ugin's second ability, where X equals 4, exiling all colored non-land permanents 4 or less. He plays a Buried Ruin. He casts Mystic Forge. He moves to combat and attacks Jay with Kozilek. Jay takes the damage, and Kevin ships the turn to Daquan. Daquan draws and plays the City of Brass. He casts Mnemonic Betrayal. With the table hearing the warning bells, it resolves, and each opponent exiles their graveyards. He casts Jeweled Lotus from exile. He casts Chrome Mox from exile, imprinting Notion Thief. He casts Mox Opal from exile. He casts Cyclonic Rift, targeting Kozilek, bouncing the Eldrazi back to his owner's hand. He taps the City of Brass to help cast Dockside Extortionist. Dockside enters, and Daquan creates 8 treasures. He casts Aetherflux Reservoir from exile. He casts Culling the Weak from exile, sacrificing Dockside as an additional cost, adding 4 black. Aetherflux triggers, and Daquan gains 6 life through Aetherflux. He casts Vampiric Tutor from exile. Aetherflux triggers, and he gains 7 life. He fetches up a card onto the top of his library and then loses 2 life. He casts Chromatic Sphere from exile. Aetherflux triggers, and he gains 8. Daquan activates Aetherflux, paying 50 life, targeting Kevin. He holds priority and cracks Chromatic Sphere to draw a card. The Aetherflux activation resolves, and Kevin is Spirit Bombed out of the game. Daquan casts Reanimate from exile, targeting Dockside Extortionist. Aetherflux triggers and he gains 9 life. Dockside enters and he loses 2 life. Then Dockside's trigger resolves and Daquan creates a treasure. He casts Gamble from exile. Aetherflux triggers and he gains 10. He fetches up a card into his hand and then randomly discards Athasa's Oracle. With nothing else, he passes the turn, and then all exiled cards are returned to their owners' graveyards. Alan draws, dies a little on the inside, and passes the turn to Jay. Jay draws and taps his Ancient Doom to help cast Dockside Extortionist. In response, Daquan cracks his Jeweled Lotus. Dockside enters and Jay creates 4 treasures. He casts Underworld Breach. It resolves and he escapes Stitcher's Supplier. It enters and he mills 3 cards. He escapes Culling the Weak, sacrificing Stitcher's Supplier as an additional cost. Supplier triggers and Daquan mills 3. Culling resolves and he has 4 black. He escapes Vampiric Tutor. He fetches up a card onto the top of his library and loses 2 life. He escapes Stitcher's Supplier. Supplier enters and he mills 3 more. He demonstrates a loop of casting Culling the Weak, sacrificing Stitcher's Supplier, then escaping Stitcher's Supplier, netting black mana, and filtering cards into his graveyard. He repeats this loop until he escapes Peer into the Abyss. He loses half of his life and then draws half of his deck. He casts Lion's Eye Diamond. He cracks his Lion's Eye Diamond, discards his hand, and adds 3 red. He escapes Mayhem Devil. He escapes Peer into the Abyss again. He draws half of his library again and then loses half of his life again. He casts a Mana Crypt. He escapes a Braid, destroying Aetherflux Reservoir, putting it into his own graveyard. He escapes Aetherflux Reservoir. He escapes Lotus Petal. Aetherflux triggers and he gains 23 life. He presents a loop of cracking Lotus Petal, escaping Lotus Petal, triggering Aetherflux, and gaining life. He repeats this process until he exceeds over 100 life. Jay powers up his Kamehameha, activates Aetherflux twice, killing both Daquan and Alan, and Jay wins the game. Ladies and gentlemen, what a wild set of games. Not very often do you get to see 3 different players trying to win with an Aetherflux Reservoir. Congrats to Daquan and Jay on their wins tonight. In Game 1, Daquan really controlled the game with his creatures while reducing his opponent's life totals to 0 through the buffs of his commander. In Game 2, Jay was able to fight through a counterbalance early on and took advantage of the cleared out board to dig deep and find a killer Aetherflux combo. A special shout out to Kevin for his awesome Kozilek brew. It's not every day that you get to see unique commanders like this at the CEDH table. We encourage people to challenge norms and take chances on commanders like these, like Kevin did tonight. The most valuable card in tonight's game, sponsored by Luxury Playstyle, goes to Aetherflux Reservoir. With the density of spells that we cast in CEDH, this card can quickly become a major threat. When combined with things like Ad Nauseam, you can find yourself in a very advantageous position very quickly. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. Tune in next time when we duke it out to see who will be king of the competitive EDH table. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.